The Crimean War and the charge of the Light Brigade, a backdrop of war and politics. This narrative is proudly brought to you by Polly Speaks For You. At Polly Speaks For You, we are committed to empowering individuals, especially those with disabilities or learning challenges, through innovative text-to-speech and voice recognition technology. Polly Speaks For You is more than just software. It's a tool for self-expression, connecting people with the world in meaningful ways. By blending the richness of history with cutting-edge technology, Polly Speaks For You demonstrates that every voice, whether preserving the past or shaping the future, has the potential to inspire. While we strive to make the story engaging, our primary focus is on storytelling itself. The visuals are secondary. We're showcasing the remarkable capabilities of text-to-speech software that bring these stories to life. In the mid-19th century, the Crimean War was the battlefield for a clash of empires. The Russian Empire, led by Tsar Nicholas I, sought to expand its influence over the Ottoman Empire and exert its dominance in the Black Sea, threatening the balance of power in Europe. The British and French empires, along with the Ottoman Empire, formed an alliance to stop Russia's territorial expansion, marking the Crimean War as a key conflict in European geopolitics. In the winter of 1854, the British forces, alongside their French allies, laid siege to the Russian-held port city of Sevastopol, a vital naval base on the Black Sea. The war was brutal, marked by the infamous charge of the Light Brigade and the legendary Battle of Balaclava, where the fates of hundreds of soldiers would become sealed in the annals of military history. At Balaclava, British forces, though vastly outnumbered, stood their ground against the Russian onslaught. It was there that the charge of the Light Brigade became a symbol of courage and confusion, a heroic act forever marred by miscommunication and the loss of many lives. The role of the Light Brigade, a cavalry force of speed and valor. The Light Brigade, part of the British cavalry under the command of Lord Lucan, was renowned for its speed and maneuverability. They were tasked with a variety of duties during the Crimean War, but at the Battle of Balaclava, their primary mission was to engage the Russian forces that threatened the British artillery on the battlefield. The Light Brigade was supposed to act as a rapid response force, moving quickly across the field to intercept Russian advances. In the face of an imminent Russian attack, the cavalry was poised to charge at any time. However, the events of October 25, 1854, would see the Light Brigade charged with a mission that would take them directly into the jaws of Russian artillery, where death and destruction awaited. The miscommunication, a fatal chain of events. The tragic events that led to the charge of the Light Brigade began with a critical miscommunication between British commanders. Lord Raglan, the overall British commander in the Crimean campaign, had received a report that the Russians had overrun a British artillery position. Desperate to stop the Russians from capturing these critical guns, Raglan ordered the cavalry to advance. The order was delivered with an ambiguous command, instructing that the cavalry advance and retake the guns. However, the wording of the message left much to be desired. The Russian artillery, in fact, had already been abandoned by their forces, and the guns were not at immediate risk. Lord Lucan, commanding the British Cavalry Division, misunderstood the order. Believing that the order was for the Light Brigade to charge directly at the Russian artillery in a desperate attempt to stop them from advancing, Lucan passed the message to Lord Cardigan, commander of the Light Brigade. Despite the confusion, Lord Cardigan did not question the order. He had faith in the chain of command and was determined to carry out the mission. As a result, on that fateful morning, the Light Brigade, 673 men on horseback, prepared to charge. As they rode toward the Russian lines, no one on either side of the battlefield fully understood what was unfolding. The Russians, positioned on the ridgelines, were prepared for the incoming charge, and their cannons lined up along the hilltops, waiting to unleash a hail of fire. The charge into the Valley of Death. The Light Brigade charged forward with all the strength and speed they could muster. Through a veil of smoke and cannon fire, they galloped directly toward the Russian guns. In the distance, the Russian artillery opened fire. Cannonballs and shrapnel rained down upon the charging soldiers, cutting through the lines, tearing apart horses, and leaving the men in a state of shock. Among the cavalry, the scene was pure chaos. Men and horses fell as the barrage of artillery continued. Yet, the soldiers pressed on, galloping ever forward, driven by a sense of duty and the unyielding command of their officers. In the chaos of the charge, Lieutenant Colonel James R. MacDonald, a survivor of the charge, recalled the events in stark detail. The sound of cannon fire was deafening. The smoke choked our lungs, and we could barely see. Yet we had no choice but to keep riding. The men were fearless, driven by honor and duty. But as we advanced, I saw the faces of the fallen, their eyes wide with shock, their bodies strewn across the battlefield. There was no time to mourn. We had a mission, and we rode to fulfill it. The Russians, though taken by surprise, fought back fiercely. By the time the Light Brigade reached the artillery positions, many of them had already fallen. The remaining soldiers, battered and bloodied, engaged in fierce hand-to-hand combat. But the charge was futile. The guns had already been abandoned by the Russians, and there was no real enemy to confront. The entire action had been a tragic misunderstanding. Diary entries, personal accounts from survivors. In the aftermath of the charge, survivors of the Light Brigade struggled to come to terms with the senseless loss of life. Many of them turned to writing to process the trauma of the battle. Diary entry of Sergeant Major Henry Havelock. October 26, 1854. We rode into the Valley of Death, and there we were met by the Russian fire. We saw comrades fall around us, and yet we could not turn back. The order had been given, and it was our duty to follow. The loss of life was unimaginable. Some men never reached the guns, their bodies torn apart by cannonballs. I will never forget the faces of the fallen, the expressions frozen in pain, yet the courage in their eyes was unmistakable. Diary entry of Captain Edward Hamilton. October 30th, 1854. As I sat in the aftermath, the noise of the battle still ringing in my ears, I could not comprehend what had just happened. We had lost so much life for nothing. It was the fog of war, the confusion of orders. Yet we rode, and for that, we are heroes in the eyes of some. But I know the truth. It was a charge driven by confusion and misunderstanding. The aftermath. Heroes or victims. After the charge, the surviving members of the Light Brigade were left to pick up the pieces. In total, around 110 men were killed, with many others injured. The loss was felt deeply by the families of the men, as well as by the officers and soldiers who had survived the charge. Lord Raglan and Lord Lucan found themselves at the center of the controversy. The miscommunication that led to the charge sparked an investigation, but both commanders were largely absolved of blame. Lord Cardigan, too, faced scrutiny but ultimately received accolades for his leadership, even as the tragic nature of the charge became clear. Diary entry of Lieutenant Colonel James R. MacDonald continued. November 5th, 1854. We are called heroes, but I know we were misled, sent to our deaths by a simple miscommunication. I wonder how history will remember us. Will they remember the bravery of those who rode into the fire, or will they see us as victims of an unfortunate mistake? I wish I could answer that question. The legacy of the charge, immortalized in history and poetry. The charge of the Light Brigade has since become an indelible part of military history. The tragic heroism of those who rode into the Russian guns was immortalized in the poem The Charge of the Light Brigade by Alfred, Lord Tennyson. The poem's opening lines, half a league, slash half a league onward, slash all in the valley of death, slash rode the 600, have become one of the most famous refrains in British literary history. Tennyson's words captured the bravery and folly of the charge. The soldiers, though unaware of the purpose of their charge, acted with unwavering courage. Their sacrifice resonated across Britain, and the Light Brigade was hailed as a symbol of indomitable bravery. Over time, memorials were built to honor the soldiers who perished in the charge. The most famous of these is the Crimean War Memorial in London's Waterloo Place, where a statue of a soldier commemorates the Light Brigade and its tragic sacrifice. A soldier's enduring memory, reflections on courage and tragedy. Years after the charge, survivors of the Light Brigade continued to reflect on their experiences. Some found solace in the recognition of their bravery, while others struggled with the ghosts of the past. In a letter to his family, Lieutenant Edward Nolan, who had delivered the orders to charge, wrote, "It was a tragic mistake, but in the end, I cannot change it. The courage of the men who rode that day cannot be questioned. They charged not for glory, but for duty, and in that, they earned a place in history. I only wish I had known that their sacrifice would be for nothing." The charge of the Light Brigade stands as a timeless reminder of the unpredictability of war, where confusion, miscommunication, and duty collide. It is a story of both tragedy and heroism, a tale that continues to echo through the corridors of history. And for those who perished that day, it is a charge that will never be forgotten. If you're enjoying this story, please remember to hit like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue creating content that educates and empowers. To learn more about South Africa's leading accessibility software and to support our dyslexic-friendly initiative, visit www.polispeaksforyou.co.za. Drop a comment if you want more information. Thank you for watching this video.